So, yeah, good morning. My name is Joanne Lockwood. I describe myself as an inclusion and belonging specialist, and I'm here this morning to talk to you about finding your why of D&I. Do you want me to kick off from that, Jen and Rosie, or do you want to introduce me further?
No, please.
I'm going to go straight in. So, as I said, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for giving me the time. So, as you can see, I've spotted it myself, and I'm going to present in this fashion. So, hopefully, you can all see me. You can all hear me. Okay. Get yourself comfortable. If Amazon decide to ring at the doorbell, just go for it. Yeah, don't worry about it. I think we are recording this, so there will be some highlights afterwards. If you do have to nip out, we understand that everyone's work from home environment or work remotely environment is different. So, yeah, do what you need to do. Fully understand. So, let me pop my slides up by the side of me. All right, where's this first slide? There we go. So finding your why of D&I and the relevance to you. That's why we're here today. And I found that poll quite insightful. There's 4 questions. And a lot of those I'm going to be talking about during the session today. I agree with a lot of the results. There's a couple I will challenge you to maybe get you to think about things in a different way. Is that okay? So what is your why of D&I? The yin and the yang, the two sides. So as we already identified in the poll, doing the right thing, the human factor. We looked at the poll and the majority of people said it's about doing the right thing. Being more inclusive is the right thing to do. But the yang, the other side of it, is finding sustainable change, the business case. And whether we like it or not, sometimes the business case is important in order to make things sustainable. Also, we have to find our own why. Why does it matter to me as a person? So not only does the business have to have a why, you have to have your own why. Otherwise, it would be someone else's strategy, someone else's idea, someone else's plan. So let me talk about the mix of the human factor, doing the right thing, and the sustainable change, the business case, and how we need to blend these together to make sure that we give a great outcome as part of our D&I playbook strategy. So we know it's the right thing to do. I want to be included, you want to be included, we all want to be treated with fairness, respect, equality, dignity, and have a level of autonomy. That's the basic principles, the freedom principles that underpin all human rights legislation and the Equality Act 2010. So I want to be treated fairly. We know it's the right thing to do. If I want to be treated fairly, it's only right that I want to treat other people with the same respect and dignity and give them a fair opportunity. But I will always say that only goes so far. It's not sustainable, despite the fact we know it's a good thing to do. What we need to do, start thinking about, is challenging existing thinking, challenging privilege, the incumbent way of doing things, because we can all see injustice. And we could be working in the best company, the most inclusive company that we can think of, but there are still pockets where people are still marginalized, people still aren't represented, people aren't getting opportunities. Maybe internal promotions are occurring without them being open to everybody. Maybe there's a queue for promotion and you have to take your turn in order to get promoted or to get opportunities. Or you don't hear about every opportunity. There's a lot of things we see in organizations, even the best organizations, that don't always consider every human factor. So we need to start to challenge when we see these kind of, well, call them injustices or opportunities for improvement. And I think we also need to start busting this myth of meritocracy. How often do I hear the best person gets the job? Well, yes, that is an ideal. That is what often people believe. But who decides who is the best person for the job? Has that been objectively constructed? Or are we saying, well, we've got a Simon-shaped hole, we want another Simon? Or are we saying we've got a Trevor-shaped opportunity and we've got lots of Trevors already in our team, so we just want more Trevors? Do we look at the opportunity here, and are we often trying to fit people into our square peg? No matter who they are, we want to just cram them into that peg. So when we're building our meritocracy, we're often looking at the incumbents, our fixed mindset, and what we've always done. How often do we sit there and challenge what makes the best person for this role? Maybe it's around EQ, emotional intelligence. Maybe it's about someone's learning potential, adaptability, their flexibility, their attitude. Actually, we could train skills. Okay, there are some professions where experience is necessary. You want someone who's got a medical degree, a medical background, if you want them to operate and do some brain surgery. So yes, I'm not saying experience isn't necessary. There are many roles where we can find the right person with the right attitude and the right capability, but we can train the various skills we need. And we all know that when we onboard someone, everybody needs to go through this 3-month, 6-month honeymoon to get up to speed with the company culture, the company documentation standards, the personalities and people involved. So everyone's on a learning curve anyway. So at that time, we can start training people to top their skills up. So let's not kid ourselves. Often the meritocracy isn't fairly stacked. And let's challenge that whenever we hear it. Another thing I hear about often is we talk about employer branding, EVP, employer value proposition. We talk about recruitment marketing. And I've seen so many examples where existing employees look at the JD, look at the ad and think, that's not us. That's not where we work. Who's this we're talking about here? This isn't my company. So what we need to be very careful about here is trying to aligning who we think we are, our employer brand, our EVP, our recruitment marketing, whatever we're doing to attract our candidates, and align that with real employee experience. Are we talking to our people? What do our people actually say about us? And this is beyond Glassdoor and other review sites. This is actually really getting into the weeds and saying to our people, what's it like to work here? Would you recommend this place? And we're not just thinking about the typical, the average people here. We're thinking about the marginalized communities, people who are underrepresented, who often don't have a voice. What are they saying? Because if your employee engagement data doesn't include the answer to who said, and when I say who, not specifically a person, but a demographic or by category. So we want to know the 85% of people are having a fantastic time working for an organization. Everyone goes, wow, 85% of people are really happy. But what about the 15% on the NPS score where they're scoring 6 or under? Do we know who they are? Are we saying that white men are having a fantastic experience, but actually black women and accounts, they're the ones that are really feeling marginalized, really feeling there's no opportunity for them? So it's really important we have the people science behind the engagement survey so we can drill down. And I see so many companies scared to ask those questions, or they've got a culture such where people are unwilling to disclose their demographics. There's lack of trust. So if you've got low reporting rates on demographics, ask yourself why. If you're not getting in the 60s and 70% of people reporting and disclosing, there's something going wrong with your culture. I've seen organizations with 20, 25%. They've really got no idea of why. And often there's this lack of trust. Why don't people trust you with their data? You've got to start asking yourself that question. So I always say that inclusion is about how you make me feel by how you treat me. So inclusion is a feeling to me. I feel included. I feel part of this. And that's by how you treat me, how you talk to me, how you motivate me, how you communicate with me, how you care about me. All these various factors make me feel included as a person. I'm sure you can relate to that as well. How do you feel? Yeah, when someone talks to you in a certain way, do you feel rejected? Do you feel part of it? Do you feel celebrated for who you are? Can you bring your whole self to work, whatever that may be, and feel included because of it? So focus on the fact that people feel included. It's not a logical thing. And it's also very holistic, active, and deliberate. So I think when you're being inclusive, you've got to think about how people feel, and you've got to think about all people. And so often I hear about, well, okay, yes, I'm a black ally, or I'm a gay ally, but I'm not sure about trans people, or I'm not sure about this. And then we forget the intersectionality of people are made up of many more than one component. So when I think about people holistically, person-centered, what matters to them. And this active and deliberateness, inclusion, allyship are active and deliberate verbs. They're doing words. They're making sure that you're doing something. You can't be passively inclusive, or we'll just make sure people are kind of happy. You've got to know, you've got to reach out and say, I want you to be part of this. I really want to invite you to my party. I really want to invite you to this opportunity. Not just simply saying at the bottom of the JD, everyone's entitled to apply. We're an equal and fair opportunity provider. I want to see recruitment marketing is targeting people, reaching out to communities that are underrepresented to say, we're really trying to represent people from your community. We want to engage with you and talk to you and find out more about why you're not engaging with us as a supplier or customer, and why we're not a bit attractive to you as an employer. So be very active and deliberate and think about it all the time. Why aren't we listening? Why aren't we including? Who aren't we hearing? So a feeling, but a very holistic, active and deliberate. Can't be a bit inclusive. You can't be a bit of a virgin. It's a very binary state. Be inclusive. So the business case, it's got to be built on vision and values. It won't be sustainable or make lasting change. Often I hear so many organizations trying to start in the middle or trying to start at the end. But you've got to go right back to the beginning. Why does it matter to us as an organization to be more inclusive, to create more representation, to be more diverse? Why does it matter? What's the point? Is it just the right thing to do? Or do we actually start seeing there's a tangible business outcome about this to create sustainable and lasting change? Because the CFO wants to know the effect on the bottom line. The CMO, when they're trying to produce product and position it in the marketplace, they need to know who the demographic is, who the people are we're representing. Customer services need to know the customers they're supporting. Can they gear up their call center, their contact center to make sure they're representing the people who may phone up? They look like them, they sound like them, they understand them. Otherwise, we've got a detached organization from the market, from the customer, from the stakeholders. So relevance to the market, it's about being represented. If the parliament, our government, was made up of all men, I'm sure many women would feel that the government doesn't represent them. We see this already in regional politics, where there's this London-centric view that everything is controlled by London and not less relevant to people in the north of England, because people don't feel they're being represented. Their voice isn't being heard. So what are we doing in our organization? Are we hearing the voice? Are we hearing the voice of our customers when they shout and scream at us and say we're getting it wrong? Are we listening? Are we listening to customers who say this product doesn't work for me? This app doesn't work for me. This website doesn't work for me because of my disability, because of my I'm not neurotypical. I've got something going on in my life where you're making your products inaccessible to me. And our clients, our stakeholders, and our staff, how do we all feel? Yeah, sometimes we focus too much on the Equality Act, the hygiene, just doing the bare minimum here. And we've got to really think about how that impacts the different groups of people and create this avatar, this persona of different people, and think about, well, how's that going to affect them? How's that going to work? So with the business case, there will be tangible business outcomes and benefits. And that's, I think we also need to recognize that these are important, because businesses fundamentally are there to make money. A business who's not out to make money doesn't survive. So we've got to balance this right thing to do with the balancing of the business outcomes and benefits. And there are loads of benefits of D&I, and I'll talk about those in a moment. So think about how we're perceived, our brand in the market. What do we stand for? We look at some big brands out there that have made some shocking errors in their PR around D&I. Some really bland Black Lives Matter statements went out in the middle of last year, very performative. Yeah, we're perfect. And the first thing that happened was past employees and people who knew them called them out and said, that's not authentic. That's not the case. So we've got to think about how we're being perceived by our market, who our demographic is. And we often make the mistake that we have to include everybody. I don't believe we have to include everybody, because one of the fears of getting it wrong, where the fears of not knowing where to start, is too complex. How do I include everybody? It makes this an impossible task. Inclusion is not about including everybody. It's about applying these freedom principles: fairness, respect, equality, dignity, and autonomy, making sure that we're being fair, objective about our inclusion strategy. And we could be honest. We make clothes for women who are athletic and high net worth. If you're not high net worth, if you're not athletic, you're not a size 10 or below, these clothes aren't for you. And we're being very blunt and honest about it. Our market is this. That's not being inclusive for people who are size 16 or plus size, or men, or people who maybe have no affluence and they can't afford the clothes. So we're being very focused on who our market is. So inclusion is very much about being very specific, but being very fair about our decision, and recognizing that we're not including, and we're doing that as a marketing or a brand strategy. We're doing that for a reason. So we don't have to include everybody, as long as we understand why we're not including people. So the ROI, the return on inclusion, retention. It's about hiring and retaining great, fantastic staff into our organization, making sure that we have the skills we need by having a wider talent pool. It also gives us opportunities in the market. By having a different group of people, a different mix of personalities, a different mix of opinions and thoughts, we can see opportunities, and we can be very relevant to our customer base. I do a lot of work with housing associations, and one of the big gripes is there's a disconnect between the management of the housing association and the people who are from low socioeconomic status, feeling that the company doesn't understand their needs. And if that's happening in housing, it's happening in other organizations. Do the customers think you understand their needs? Do they understand the frustration of being you as a customer? If they don't, then you're going to feel disconnected. You're going to move your brand somewhere else. If you go to the supermarket and you don't feel this place is for you, you'll find a supermarket that is. So by having this inclusive, diverse culture and representation of people in your organization, you'll know that you can be relevant to those markets. And I think you can already start seeing, just on these 4 points, there's a return. There's a positive impact on the bottom line. Retention, if we can increase tenure by even 10 or 20%, that could save hundreds of thousands of pounds for most large organizations. Opportunities, new products, new design, gives us innovation, competitive advantage. Access to skills, we find it far easier to bring in new talent. And of course, we're relevant. We're going to stay relevant. We're going to see opportunities. We're going to not be surprised of the rise of digital technology, unlike Kodak, who didn't see it coming. We can see loads of brands that have faded out over the last couple of years during COVID in retail. They just haven't stayed relevant. And you look at the boards, you look at the structure, and they're kind of monolithic and not open to change. So D&I is going to bring in dynamic, different people into that organization. So next, think about your why. I'm often asked when I do consultancy engagements, do I have a sample D&I strategy that they can adopt and play and change? And my reaction is always, there is no one-size-fits-all playbook. Yes, I can give you some touch points. I can give you a start, middle, and end. I can talk about the things that go into the playbook. But unless you truly own that playbook, it just simply becomes this dusty PDF sat on a digital bookshelf somewhere that nobody owns. It's got to be about your people, your priorities, and your plan as a business. And that's where you start. The board need to understand their why. Why are we trying to do this? It's the right thing, but we also recognize the business opportunities out of this. Finding your what, we need some goals, we need to track, we need to measure, we need to repeat things and communicate. How often do we just set off into the distance without knowing what we're trying to achieve? There's a recent, I think, last couple of days, the FTSE 350 have published the fact that now 1/3 of their board are made up of women. And that was there was a club called the 30% Club, and the goal of that was to try and get 30% representation of women across the FTSE 100 or FTSE 350. And that started to be achieved. But is that good enough? What does your organization have in terms of a goal? Do you want gender equality, gender balance by the year 2030, by the year 2050, by the year 2060? I mean, we want it now, obviously, but what's realistic? How are we going to achieve that? So we set our goals, we set our targets. And this is not about quotas. It's not about marginalization, ticking boxes and just quoting people. This is about having sustainable goals so we know when we're achieving it. If we want to increase our racial mix, racial diversity, how are we going to achieve that? How are we going to measure that? How are we going to see if we're achieving it? How are we going to course correct if it goes wrong? So communicate, it's got to be part of every strategy. If we're not communicating, we're not talking to our people, we're not rolling this down. We've got to think about the message that's coming from the senior leadership team, the exec team, how that's rolled down to their direct reports. Because when it's rolled down to the teams, the people, the shop floor, whoever that may be, if it's not joined up through the layers, there'll be disconnect. People will go, oh, here we go, another brainwave by management. Here we go again. So it's got to be really joined up. It's got to be a program of events mapped out, planned. The playbook has got to have all this in it. How are we going to achieve this? How are we going to communicate with this? So we need to involve our comms team, our internal marketing. All of these things are part of our D&I rollout and playbook. So finding out the how, it's got to start with changing culture, changing process, changing attitudes. We've got to really lift up all the covers, look in all the nooks and crannies and say, what's going wrong with our culture? What are our processes fit for purpose? Do we need to just stop, pause, have a look around and go, actually, this doesn't work. This is propagating the status quo. And we may find that we've got lots of people in our organizations that have fixed attitudes. Maybe they're not the right people going forward. Maybe we need to think about a new dynamic team. Maybe when we're looking to hiring, our meritocracy includes different mindsets, not just lived experience and of this particular business sector before. Maybe you bring someone who hasn't had your experience in your sector because you're going to bring that new thinking. But it's not a quick fix. Again, I see companies say, we're trying to get our D&I strategy rolled out by Easter. Well, that's not realistic. It's going to take you till Easter to talk about this in your board. Get your senior leadership team, get some training, start looking at the training you're going to need for the leadership team and the direct reports before you even think about deploying this to your people. You need to start this jungle drums of going out to your people saying, here's the engagement survey. Why are you completing the engagement survey? Because we're on this trajectory and you're going to hear more information as we go through. This is a continual process that evolves over the course of a year to 2 years and then carries on sustainably building and building and building. And organizations need to learn how to listen. Listening is critically important. It's a skill that organizations think they know best. How often do the people who are doing the job, doing the role, they know the customers, they know the problems. How often do you drive home from work? Well, back in the old days when you went to work and drove home, we don't do that anymore. Maybe at the point you leave your desk, put your slippers back on and go to a different room in the evening. How often do you think about, oh, that happened again. Oh, here we go again. I'm not being listened to. That project I was on just got cancelled. No one ever listens to what I think about it. So we've got all these frustrations, all these thoughts going on in our people's heads. How do we capture that? How do we understand how they feel about working for our organization? Not everyone's happy all the time. And I'm not saying we need to listen to everybody all the time, but what we need to do is we need to have this pulse. And this comes with the engagement surveys, listening to people. And I often hear people saying, well, hang on a minute, we've surveyed out. We've got so many surveys, we just surveyed out. People aren't tired of surveys. They're tired of nothing happening as a result of them. If you ask me a question, you want my opinion, I tell you. If you keep asking that question and you never do anything with it, of course, I'm going to get to the point where I say, what's the point? Why bother? Why am I bothering talking to you if you don't care what I'm saying and you're not going to change it? So we need to kind of have this you said we did mentality. The NHS do it. Government organizations do it. They have notice boards everywhere. This is what you said last month. This is what we're doing. This is what we've done. So people can see the tangible progress that's going on. They feel part of it. Use your staff networks, use your employee resource groups to feed back this information. They're not just cake and cookies on a Friday and sing songs and hashtag months. ERGs are part of your business. Leverage them, use them. If you're having customer service challenges, are you involving your staff networks to help with the customer service problems, to think about how you can re-engineer your process and use the lived experience of your people and listen to them to change the process in the organization? Cleaning the tank. This is obviously really important. How many times do I hear people trying to hire their way into a diversity strategy? Oh, we need to hire more women, more Black people. We need to hire people to dilute our whiteness or whatever it may be. But we don't fix the toxicity. We don't clean the tank. If we're bringing new fish into our aquarium, we clean the tank out. Or what we do is bring fish into dirty water and they get infected. So are we bringing new people into our dirty water of our office? Is there still a dead rat in the stockroom? Have we really drilled down to find out the mood, the feelings of our organization? Does our engagement survey match our employer brand, who we think we are, who we say we are? Because if it doesn't, all that's going to happen is you're going to put a lot of money, time, and effort into hiring people from different backgrounds. And the first thing that's going to happen is they'll come in and go, this place stinks, I'm off. And they'll straight out the back door. So not only we've got to measure our recruitment demographics, our stats, we've got to start looking at our exit stats. Who's leaving? Who's coming in? Who's getting promotion? Who's getting great appraisals? We need these demographics throughout our process so we can say with certainty that, yes, we're bringing in women and women are aspiring, women are getting promoted, women are getting great appraisals, and women aren't leaving. Women are staying. And our average tenure of a new hire who's female is over 3 years. That way we can see we're making a difference. That way we know we've got a clean tank. We're starting to see the signs of new shoots growing. Another frustration I have is where we talk about diversity hiring. What is diversity hiring? Sometimes it almost leads you into thinking a diverse hire is second best, because a non-diverse hire must be better, because that's what we've been doing. So if we're hiring for diversity, we're changing the meritocracy. We're saying, well, we must hire a Black person here, because if we didn't do this diversity hiring malarkey, we'd be hiring a white person. So diversity hiring is seen as sometimes as hiring for second best. We've got to change that, reframe it. It's not diversity hiring. We're seeking representation. We're seeking for people who aren't currently represented in sufficient numbers in our organization. We've got imbalance compared with society. We haven't got enough women based on society. We haven't got enough people from underrepresented communities, for minority communities, from low socioeconomic groups in our organization, because that's who our customers are. We need to make sure we've got people from those groups to represent our customers and give a voice to how we design things. So we're seeking representation for marginalized or underrepresented groups. We're seeking voice. We know that in certain professions, it's overrepresented by women. There are certain professions, maybe accounting, maybe in the junior legal sector, in nursing. So hiring for diversity in those organizations often is hiring men. There are inner city organizations in certain boroughs in London where actually there are already 99% people who are Black or from a minority community. So in some cases, you actually need to get representation of white people in those organizations because there are white people in those boroughs. So again, by reframing diversity into underrepresentation or representation, what we're doing is we're focusing on who isn't in our organization. How do we want to bring those people in, and not just seeing it as hiring more women, hiring Black people, hiring disabled people, hiring neuroatypical people. So I think the framing of it is creating voice, creating representation of people we serve and support in our communities. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, got that.
What matters? People value the sense of belonging. We talked about inclusion, but what makes people stay? What makes customers stay? What makes staff stay? What do investors stay? They feel part of it. You're environmental, you're sustainable, you've got great D&I plans, you've got all these great things. I feel part of this. I understand the mission. I understand the values. This company is fantastic to work for because we're all aligned. That's what creates this belonging. So if you don't feel the sense of belonging, people will leave. Customers, staff, investors, whoever that may be, because they just won't feel your organization's for them. So focusing on inclusion, how you make people feel, but also really focus on this, what is a belongingness? How do I become part of the corporate club, if you like? So finding a vision, it's very important to think about your trajectory, your heading. What does great look like? And I always come from a show, don't tell model. So where are we trying to go? What's the big picture? What are we painting? What great looks like an organization where everyone can thrive. Great looks like we have fair and equal representation across gender, across race, across faith that is representative of our community. The people we employ, the people we serve feel a sense of belonging in our organization. Whatever your D&I mission value statement is, something like that. That's what you're trying to do. That's your heading. And then once you've got your overall heading, then think about the vector and velocity. How fast can you go? Set the targets. How quickly can we achieve that? Because if you try and set off too quickly, you'll leave people behind. And we know that sometimes we have to work with the slowest people because inclusion is holistic. We can't just leave people behind because they're not keeping up, because maybe they can't cope with the change. Maybe they're change fatigued. I see so often in organizations where there's so much change going on. People go, oh, here we go again, another reorganization, another department head, another team reshuffle. And what happens is people just get fatigued by it. And that sense of belonging breaks down. They go, oh, not again, I'm off. I might as well join someone that's stable. So we've got to be careful about our timescales and not overreach and overstretch. And there's lots of other things with COVID, Brexit to deal with, all these other challenges we've got in our business. And D&I can be another priority. So we've got to try and map it in there. What is achievable? What are the risks? What are the priorities of succeeding or not succeeding? Are we going to damage our staff with this process, or are we going to enhance and protect and create a better place? So it's about being realistic about what is achievable and what the timescales are, and making sure we've got people bought into this. Think about, holistic, all people, intersectionally. We've got to recognize that people who are not just Black, they're not just white, they're not just female, they're not just male. We all have intersections, and that goes beyond the protected characteristics. It can be down to wealth. We're looking in COVID, we've got the digital divide, we've got the impact of children, isolation, introvert, extrovert, how our learning styles. We've got a whole load of different aspects about us, but also recognizing that some people have privilege and some people don't, or have a lack of privilege, whether it's English first language, whether it's access to space at home so that everyone can work on a different table, not all gathered around the breakfast bar trying to work every day. So we've got to think about different sorts of privilege and how we can involve people and think about the impact we're having on our people, and are we talking to them. Owning language. How often do I hear, well, the intent was good. intent only goes so far. We've got to make sure that when we're cleaning our tank, we've got to look at our corporate language. What is acceptable language internally? And this is not about being all PC and creating this happy environment where no one can laugh. I mean, one may argue that I live in the D&I space, as I'm sure many of you do. People would certainly say that I know how to laugh, I know how to have a good time. And I try and do it without someone being the brunt of that laugh, without someone being the target of my jokes. So with intent, we've got to think about who the potential impact is going to be on someone. Yeah, I didn't intend to hurt you, but the impact was you did. How do you become accountable for that language? We don't always get, fear of getting it wrong. It's one of the barriers in D&I is people are scared to engage, scared to have a conversation because they're scared of getting it wrong. But be accountable. I'm sorry. We're sorry as an organization. We let you down. We know that. What can we do next time to make it better and learn? If you keep making the same mistake, it becomes it becomes who you are. You've made a choice not to change. So don't hide behind intent. Understand the impact as you personally and as you as an organization, and learn to be accountable and own it, not push it. Not it was a mistake. I made a mistake. We made a mistake. How can we do better? That's very important. We need allies and change makers. We need people internally to step up, become allies, enable change, break down stereotypes. So I think part of any D&I strategy, any playbook, is allies programs, empowering people. This is not just wearing a rainbow lanyard, a badge, a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, whatever this means. It's about really giving people the tools and the training so that they can become powerful allies. They know how to learn, do research, they know great language, they know how to amplify, they know how to create spotlights on people. And then breed that within your organization so you all become allies to each other, but especially to marginalized or underrepresented groups, and how you can pick up the strain as if it was your own. So in summary, before we go over to questions, I think that's about half an hour. I think that's what I promised. So start with vision and values. Don't start at the end. Don't start by hiring people. What are you trying to achieve? What's your big picture? What does your fantastic look like? What's great look like? What do we really want to achieve out of this? Then find your vector and velocity. Where are you heading? Where's your horizon? Learn how to correct that through tracking and measuring. Don't go too quickly. But also think about inclusion and belonging. How do you make people feel? Do people feel a part of it? Are they communicated with? Do they understand the mission? Could you have a conversation with everyone in your organization and they understand the vision and values? Does every person in your organization understand your why of D&I? And do they have their own why of D&I? And that's the challenge. Find your why of D&I, not just for you, but for your organization. Thank you.
Joanne, that was fabulous. Thank you so much. We'd now like to open the floor to any questions. Should we do it in the chat, or do you want to speak to people directly? What's best?
I guess if you curate the questions and ask me them, and I'll respond. And if someone wants to sort of get into a dialogue as it, or you can invite someone to chat. Yeah, whichever you prefer.
Okay, fantastic. Any questions?
This wasn't a question, but Caroline certainly referred, Joanne, when you were talking about different sectors and different sort of experiences. A lot of us are from the HR world on this call. So HR, for example, mainly women, and yet often at the very top of that pyramid, the leaders can be men. And we've seen that in teaching as well. So that was Caroline's just observation as you were going through your chat earlier.
And that's often this concrete ceiling, this ceiling that occurs, the broken rung in the ladder. There's many analogies that we use where we're bringing in people at the lower levels, but somehow the opportunities never exist for people as they rise through your organization. I think that's critical, where the leadership team and the direct reports really need to look around them. It's part of their KPIs, as part of their own role. They have to be responsible for mentoring and bringing people through so that there's representation at all levels, not just this massive sort of lower level, if you like.
I know you don't want to give people a playbook, but you said I often, there's a beginning, a middle and an end. A lot of people were doing the poll at the beginning and saying, actually it's where do we start? What advice would you give people to walk away from today with as that starting point?
The starting point is knowing you want to start. I always say to people, once you've identified the fact you want to start, that is 100% better than you were yesterday. Yeah, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And the first step is identifying the fact you need a playbook. You need to understand what you're going to achieve. And I believe that I hear so often that where people who aren't on the senior leadership team, not directors, not a C-suite player, having to go to the C-suite to justify the strategy. I always turn around and say, well, if it's a strategy, if it's strategic, that's the role of the C-suite. That's the role of the board, to create strategy and then to empower people who work in the organization to implement the strategy in the operational, in the getting it done sort of phase. So I wholly believe that we need to get senior leadership buy-in. And I know we talked at the first poll questions, no way to start, but I think one of the struggles we often have is getting senior leadership buy-in. So where to start? Start with getting leadership buy-in. Leadership would then need to find their why. I mean, I always start with sitting down with a board and running a workshop and saying, okay, out of this workshop, we're going to come up with your top 5 achievable items, an outline of when you want to achieve this by, and the resources you'll need to start achieving this, and then empower someone to put meat on the bone of that playbook. And the playbook itself would have the value statement, the vision, the direction, a time map. It would have, it would talk about inclusive leadership, what inclusive leadership looks like to our organization, what inclusive behavior looks like for our people, what our value proposition is, what we as an organization expect from our people, and what our people can expect from us. So I would say that is a typical playbook to kick off the process. And within that, we can look at returner program, mentor programs, all the other elements that we want to build into our D&I program. We can build that into our timeline. But I think it has to start with the ownership at the board, at the C-suite, and the direct reports, and get them to buy in. Because if we try and roll it out too quickly to the people, there'll be this, as I said, there'll be this disconnect. People will go, what's going on? And their team lead, their manager won't know. They'll just say, oh yeah, don't worry about it. It'll change next month.
Good.
So yeah, start with the vision and values. Start by producing a plan and a playbook, and then get the ownership of that.
Good. There's a question that's come in from Katie. What would be your top tip for encouraging allyship and helping people to recognise white privilege? I think she works in a technical and engineering organisation, so heavily dominated by white males.
I'm a great believer in lived experience talks. So if your organisation isn't having a weekly or a monthly lunch and learn type session, or a twilight evening function, or a breakfast briefing, then maybe start thinking about bringing in some lived experience speakers. And if you've got a large organization, these people may exist within your organization already. If not, bring people in. Start telling stories around being Black, around being disabled. Bring speakers in that can talk about these things. So that's I think that creates the awareness, that gives people the first step of what they don't know. Knowing what you don't know is the first step. So I think once you start bringing that in, then look at allies programs where you can specifically, and I'm not talking about being specifically a Black ally or a female ally or trans ally, whatever that may be. I'm thinking more about what it means to be a people ally. Holistically, about what an ally means, how you can learn to be an ally. Don't hand out lanyards from a box. You have to earn the lanyard. Make it an award, so that people, in the same way you're a first aider or a fire marshal, you're a mental health first aider. Make being an ally a recognized part of your role, an aspiration that you can be proud of. Then when people see you, they know that you're a person who can help. In the same way, if you're a mental health first aider, people know they're struggling, they need signposts and they need some assistance. So I think building up from that is a way of doing it. But in terms of the specific question around if you work in a white dominant organization, at some point, you've got to try and create that need for change. You've got to try and tell that story. How do you get the people to listen? I don't know. I don't know your organization, but what I do know is that ask for mentorship, ask for somebody who could be your mentor, speak to people who maybe in HR, people who have voice, people who can amplify, discuss the problem. But if you're working in an organization where all the senior leadership are men and white, and there's nothing wrong with being a male and white, I did try it once. I didn't like it personally, but we don't want to demonize. Again, when we're being holistic, we've got to value and respect the fact that we can't demonize white men. It's not fair. They do fantastic work and they run fantastic organizations, and so we've got to involve everybody, and we've got to try and create a platform for change where we create an opportunity for people to listen and share. The analogy I often use is that when women were allowed to vote by men about 100 odd years ago, men had to allow women to vote in Parliament. So in order to get change, we have to get the people with power and privilege to allow us to have a seat at the table. And that may sound like it's not fair. Why should I ask people to allow me to vote? But if we're constantly trying to siege the castle, the people on the inside with the power and privilege are going to pull the drawbridge up. They're going to start firing arrows over the turrets and pour oil on you. So what we're going to try and do is create this collaborative process where the drawbridge comes down. We all sit and talk. No one sees it as a threat. And that's where the dialogue happens. We're not trying to battle the incumbent privilege. What we're saying is, help us, allow us in, let's have a talk. We're not trying to steal your pie. We're just trying to make bigger pie.
Yeah. Great. We've got loads of questions, Joanne, so I'll try and whiz through them. Kim says she believes role modelling is important from leaders to build and support a culture. If we can give our leaders direction as to how they begin to role model, what would it be?
I'd like to think in most leadership tiers, there are people who are already starting to role model. I mean, it's very unusual in an organization to have nobody that is progressive and forward thinking. So I think the mood of the world, the mood of the culture, the changes of COVID, the Black Lives Matter, there's a whole lot of awareness now. I think many more people are kind of, to quote a term, woke. People have woken up to the need to be more inclusive. So I think the mood of the society, the mood of an organization is changing. So what can we do to help leaders be better allies, role model? I think it's identifying what we're looking for, allyship for, mentoring for. If that's creating pathways for women into the board, it's creating graduate programs, it's creating whatever, or champions. I think, again, that's part of our playbook. There's no one size fits all. What we're trying to do here is saying, what are we trying to achieve? And I wholly believe we need to empower people at all levels with KPIs, with targets, with part of their job description, part of their role is to be more inclusive, is to create opportunity for people who aren't represented and have measurements against that. Because if we're just measuring people on budget, profit lines, et cetera, and we're not putting that human side in, then we can't succeed. And I also think if we're doing engagement surveys, and we can break that down by department, by team. We can give directors, we can give senior leadership team, we can give managers, we can give team leaders the insights for their team, and we can create actionable insights. We say, well, actually, your team are saying this, and here's some benchmarks against other organizations, and these are the initiatives they did to create a better culture within their team. And also, you can champion best practice within your organization. So, well, we understand that this customer service are having really high scores in most engagement surveys. We're getting a lot of engagement there, but finance aren't. Let's look at what we can do this comparison, get people together around the table and saying, well, why are you doing so great? Why are we not doing so great? So I think it's about bringing people together and using your own internal organization to benchmark each other and support and mentor each other. Yeah, I say there's no one size fits all, but that's the kind of strategy I would always advocate: is be your own best practice if you can. If you often know your people better than anybody else.
And Joanne, I think you've probably just answered Elizabeth's question, which was very much around the frozen middle. Middle managers influence people's sense of belonging day to day, and how do you address that frozen middle? I think that probably would apply there as well.
I think it's putting it in the playbook. You know, it's saying we recognize this happens, owning that, and not saying, oh, and just ignoring it. It's only in the fact that occurs in your organization. You've got the demographics. You can see where people are represented. We look at mean pay. It's not just when we're looking at gender pay gap, we're looking at ethnicity pay gap. It's about mean pay. We can see quite clearly there's an imbalance of salary between men and women, and that's across the organization. We can see where that exists at different levels. So I think that's where we've got to start looking at those demographics to see where this frozen middle is, and then own it. And put it on the playbook and say, we've got it. We know we're doing it. How do we solve that? And then that becomes part of the strategy is to resolve that problem.
Chris raises a point, and it is an interesting one. I think my eyebrows went up when you said presenting the privilege discussion. He said, if we go in hard against the majority, you're potentially in danger of entrenching views and making people feel under attack. So that's a cautionary note.
Yeah. Don't charge the castle. Don't get your troops and start a lynching mob. It's about allowing. We've got to recognise that the privilege, the people who hold the power in organisations have to open up. And by attacking, all you'll do is make people close ranks and close down. So it is very much a dialogue, a discussion, a visionary model. So show, don't tell. I'm not telling you what to do. What I'm doing is showing you a path where, through business benefits, through the right thing to do, through all these intangibles we talked about, lead to better retention, lead to this. But one of the things we also know is that, we've all seen McKinsey. We can all quote the stats on more inclusive companies achieve this, more diverse companies achieve that. But the facts don't change people.
Yeah.
Because if they did, we'd all be doing it.
Yeah.
We know the speed limit is 70 miles an hour, but people still drive above the speed limit. The facts don't change people. We know that we smoke, it kills us. We know we eat too much red meat, it's going to kill us. We know if we drink too much, it's going to kill us, but people still do it. So the facts don't change. So what we've got to try and do is we've got to nudge people in different ways and create a reason to change. It's got to be more comfortable to go to where you want to be than it is to stay where you are. We've got to create that sort of stigma, if you like. And that could be the market, it could be your customer demands, it could be a whole lot of factors that you suddenly wake up to and go, actually, if we don't change, our business is on a death spiral into the tarmac here.
Caroline makes a really interesting point in the chat. She says, there are those of us that perhaps change, but change to fit in. That assimilation, don't have as much privilege, but assimilate to fit in and be more successful, i.e. acting more middle class, becoming more alpha male type, as a female to get into leadership. So those of us who change to fit in rather than authenticity needs really addressing, because we're prepared to change, but maybe not changing the right way.
I don't know if you read the book by Mary Portas, Work Like a Woman. And she talks about that exact point about many women feel they've got to work like a man. What Mary's book discusses is the fact that women should work like women and value empathy, values the skills that women bring to an organization, and not make every woman behave like a man to succeed, or even believing that's how you succeed. So I think some of it's mindset and some of it's reality. But Mary Porter's book, Work Like a Woman, is a really fantastic book. I listened to it on Audible. And there's a Disney Pixar cartoon called Pearl, P-U-R-L, which is like this 8-minute clip of a ball of wool who is a young girl starting in the organization, and she feels that she has to assimilate herself to the men of the organization. And then what happens is a new starter arrives, and it's another young girl ball of wool, and she feels that shame of having assimilated herself, and she propagated the status quo. And then so I think, again, it's incumbent on us all to not be assimilated, to bring our whole selves to work, because all we end up doing is allowing the next person to come into the same environments. As those of us who have strength of character have got to say, it stops on my watch, if you like.
Yeah. I'm rattling through this. We've got so many messages, Joanne. We're going to run out of time. But Elizabeth says Microsoft has a great allyship framework, being an ally to one, ally to some, and ally to all, each with specific behaviours and actions. So thank you for sharing that. Katie's just thanking you around the fish tank analogy. I think that for me really was instantly accessible in terms of a mindset.
I can't claim that. That's quite a well-used phrase, but I don't claim that one.
Yeah. David says, what is the best way for active allies from majority groups to inspire and encourage culture change compared to successful influencers from underrepresented groups who offer similar life experiences?
I think we shouldn't underestimate the person who holds power and privilege of being an ally. They have greater voice, greater amplification, greater credence in an organization. So I think we have to value those people. But as we all know, to be a fantastic ally, you don't speak over people. You're not trying to do this for you. So if they're a fantastic ally, they will already be talking to the people who they are an ally to. They'll be hosting listening sessions. They'll be talking to people. They'll be hosting staff networks. So yeah, in order to be a great ally, those are the kind of behaviors you'll be doing. But then you're using your power and voice and amplification, to create space, to say, hang on a minute, actually, we've got our person here who wants to talk, and bring them into the boardroom. So that's that role of that ally, being that mentorship, creating space. I always talk about being a great ally is about creating room around the table, shifting up, creating a space for someone else to sit next to you, and then saying, this person would love to have to talk to you right now. And if you just wouldn't mind, stop talking for a minute while they speak. And then amplifying, repeating, and emphasizing that they were amazing. So that's what allies can do. They can amplify and almost like extend their credibility, extend their privilege around that person to give them voice. And that's what I would say senior leadership allies do through their mentoring programs. Maybe if you're not doing it already, 360 mentoring is a fantastic way where leadership team have junior people in the organization who are not like them, whatever that may mean. So they both learn from each other. So a person from an underrepresented background meets with a person who's power and privilege from a represented majority, and they share lived experience, and they both help each other. Giving a pathway to the board about what it's like to be me, but also taking that mentorship to allow accelerated career.